Hi, I'm Jerry Hyde, Youth Services Librarian at the Ames Public Library. Welcome to Well Read, a program about a little bit of this and a little bit of that at your Ames Public Library. This is a second part of our Best Books of 2013, only this time it isn't best books of what we at the Ames Public Library thought, but what some would call them experts in the field. Some would call them people who don't know what they're talking about. And some would call them great guidance for purchasing and for reading and sharing with your family and your children. So whatever your definition of what award-winning titles or award-winning committees that choose the award-winning titles are, we're here to talk about those today. And I'm here with Anastasia, who's another youth services librarian at the Ames Public Library. You'll see her quite often. And I imagine some of you have had her expertise in helping you choose a book. But today she's my expert in the field of our award-winning books. So welcome, Anastasia. And we ready to take a look at some award-winning books? And then let's have a little conversation, about what ones that we thought were going to win as well. So we're going to start, the one that always is dear and near to me is the Randolph Caldecott Award. Started way back in the early 1900s by Frederick Melcher to celebrate the illustrator of a book written in America. And Randolph Caldecott was an English illustrator that they honored for his wonderful works that he has done during that time period. So it's been around for quite a while, a long time. And so let's go ahead and talk about our winners this year, which happens to be Locomotive. Very good book. Tell us a little bit about what you thought about Brian Floca's Locomotive.
So this book, I really appreciated how it gave you a sense of what the world was like in the early 1900s. I believe, I didn't check the date, but when the Transcontinental Railroad was completed. This is a story of a family taking a journey across the country for the very first time. And I really liked imagining what the world was like at that time, what our country was like at that time. There is a page that shows the Great Plains that are pretty, one might say, open or possibly empty. And Brian Floca mentioned that this was something that people often wrote home about. There was no mountains, there was no trees, it was so empty. And I did actually drive this stretch at Christmas, and it is still a lot that way. So I appreciated the big open vistas and how the oversized book really brought that out. Yeah.
Well, and it's got some really interesting techniques. He's put a lot of story and interesting facts, and like you said, the illustrations are just fabulous as well, because he combines that typeface. In the in covers there are wonderful information. We start at Omaha, Nebraska, which I mean many of us here in Iowa know where that is at. Hopefully. And Omaha or Nebraska is that flat plain that you drive forever, and it seems like you don't ever see anything but flat land. And but the other thing that I think, in addition to the illustrations, is his use of the typeface. I mean, it varies quite a bit in what he uses and how he uses it. And yes, that's the page where it starts a little small and then it gets full steam ahead. So you can see that excitement and that noise that will happen, and then he defines what different places in the locomotive is, and how they made it run. Which
very informational. About
and that's what makes it a juvenile nonfiction as well. So and not very often do nonfiction books win the Caldecott Award, but in this case, a very well deserved award, I think. Although we know that there's also been some controversy about how the representation of it being multicultural and representing the true historical parts of our history and of all cultures. So, but Locomotive, I think, can't disagree with that one as far as I'm concerned. Personally, I wouldn't disagree with that. Locomotive by Brian Floca is definitely a winner.
It was amazing, yes.
And it was a hard year, I think, for
yeah.
determining Caldecott's, because several of the honor books are also very interesting. So we have that journey.
And this was one that many people thought would win the medal, I
Yes,
think. I
yes.
heard a lot of people saying, and you and Chris, I think, had talked about how it was probably one of your top picks
Yes,
for the year.
it was one of my top
so-
picks for the year. So it's another very good book of the travels of a little girl who is kind of lonely in her own world because mom's doing something and dad's doing
Right.
something, and
Yep.
so she kind of goes pouting in her room.
And then
But-
she draws on her wall.
And she draws on her wall. Uh-oh. We don't want to promote that necessarily, unless you want to promote that, parents, moms and dads, and grandpas and grandmas. But the things that she draws and takes her into her imagination. What kind of thoughts did you have on this one?
Yeah, I think definitely the power of imagination is what comes through in this book, and really a lot of books is that you can be anywhere you want to be, and the author talks about how he often liked to imagine things, and some of it came out of his travels, and so I think our daily experiences affect what we imagine too, and then that she finds some companionship at the end.
Right.
I really like
well,
that too.
and the bird gets captured by other people, so
Right.
there's like social issues there too. You
Yes.
could definitely read into it, not necessarily the intent of the author. Because I also saw a lot of Harold and the Purple Crayon in this, and I don't know how they would feel about that, but
Yeah.
and friendship and coming together,
Right.
combining two people's lives together and having that relationship, that they have by drawing the two circles
Yeah.
and creating a bike out of it
Yeah,
together.
and then going together.
So that
on that journey.
collaborativeness as well. So very cool.
Yeah, so that was a Caldecott Honor book this year.
Right. And then let's do a couple of the other ones. The Caldecott, and I could take some, I guess, and put them over here. Mr. Waffles is kind of a funny one. You want to talk about that one and the specialness of that?
Mr. Waffles is very creative. The cat is playing with his toys, and it turns out that this small flying saucer has actually aliens, very, very tiny aliens in it. But what to me it made me think about is we really don't know what goes on behind our walls, under the baseboards, where the mice run around. There could be little aliens for all we know.
For all we know.
And how it incorporates the everyday items, like they find a marble and that's what they use to fix their spaceship. So there's everyday items like marbles and pencils and paper clips, and then spaceships and aliens.
Spaceships and aliens, and this wonderful
So-
cat, Mr. Waffles,
Yes.
who has some fantastic eye facial kind of
yes.
things that are going on. The aliens are very unique as well.
Yes.
They do lots of different types of words that we don't
They
know,
do.
of course,
They
because
have their
they're
own-
aliens.
Yes.
But in this graphic novel, typical Wisner type of illustration, another really great one.
Yeah.
And then we'll move on with Flora and the Flamingo, and this one has been created by a Disney Pixar cartoonist type of person. And you can definitely tell that.
Yeah.
In addition to the wonderful storylines with the flaps and.
Yeah, that's what's been so creative about this one. And, book publishing has come a long way that they can do things like this with the flaps.
So we have the
been a lot
flamingo
of
and the
fun.
little girl that's trying to dance as well, and the wonderful characteristics of the page. How she uses the page and the flaps and
Yeah.
making things happen. And it when I read about the illustrator and it talked about her being a cartoonist,
Right.
it really made it come to life that, that's why you flip it real
Yeah.
fast and it's going to go.
Right.
Yeah.
She worked for DreamWorks, it looks like.
DreamWorks,
So,
there we go.
Yeah. The expressions on the little girl's face, there's, this is a very happy page. There's also a very sad page. And they're just very well done.
Yes.
And it's, again, wordless. We're
Yes.
seeing a lot more of those, and it's a great opportunity for readers and pre-readers alike to tell their own story with the book. So we really enjoy those.
And what young person cannot identify with trying to dance and trying to do it? Well, a young person, maybe even adults, would identify with wanting to be that smooth, graceful flamingo and trying to make that work. So.
Yep.
And then we go to another special award, the Theodor Geisel Award. And now that's not quite as old,
Right.
but it is honoring those easy-to-read, beginner-reader books. And I have to tell you that through the years, easy-to-read and those beginner-reader books have kind of changed shapes.
Yes.
They used to be very much this, we don't even have a regular shaped one.
No.
Although there was a couple winners that were your typical winners with the 5 by 7 inches
Yeah.
or whatever, that narrow little book that fit really nicely
On those shelves.
those
Yeah.
shelves that we chose for easy to read. But now look at what the publishers are doing.
Yep. Yeah, and this is something that I think we've noticed over a lot of the awards, is that there's been some mushing of genres. That Locomotive, we could shelve it in the picture books or the juvenile nonfiction. The Watermelon Seed, it was chosen as the winner for the Geisel Award for excellence in beginning reading, but we have chosen to put it in the picture books because it's just an excellent read together book. But the simplicity of the vocabulary and the story make it excellent for beginning readers as well. And the joy and confusion and frustration on the alligator's face as he tries to figure out, what will this watermelon seed do if it lives in my stomach for too long?
Yes.
They were just excellent.
And children also think that,
Right.
Or wonder that,
yeah.
shouldn't think that, wonder that. But yes, like what he's done with the typeface, the
Yes.
letters are
Yes.
changing colors,
Right.
changing size. Again, it's punctuated very nicely. It's got the contractions to help out with that beginner reader as well.
And the short lines.
And
Yep.
the illustrations that really balance that. That, like you said, with his facial expressions, you can take a look at the word and take a look at what he's saying and
Right. Do
and
all that
doing.
decoding.
Right.
Yeah.
So
that the
a
beginning
very good
readers are
one.
doing.
That happened to be the winner. We had a couple honors. What was it? Marble.
Penny and Her
Penny
Marble,
and Her Marble
by
by
Kevin
Kevin
Hinkes.
Hinkes. And then the one of the piggy and
Yes,
Our-
Big Guy Took My Ball.
Yes.
An Elephant and Piggy one.
From
which
Mo
that
Willems.
series is excellent.
Yeah, those were. But we have another picture book type of easy read, wordless book that was chosen as a Geisel Award as well. And this, I can't tell you this dog. It's kind of like Mr. Wuffles. It just is an everybody's dog type of look.
Yeah.
And he wants this ball, and he wants his owner to throw the ball, and the owner has to go to school. And then he tries really hard to get the mom that's doing yoga to throw the ball. No luck, and no luck for the baby that's at home. In fact, the baby gets scared to death of him, and then he tries to chase the ball by himself, and he gets in trouble as well. But no words, so we
That's
can.
an interesting choice.
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't have a chance to look at this
Yeah.
one. Oh, it says ball. Ball,
Oh,
I guess,
that's true.
right?
And I
One
think
word?
ball's like 44 times or something that's in there.
Okay.
So, but he goes into this dream sequence as well, and where the ball's all over, and he has on the next page, there's a birthday cake that's got balls
Oh.
on it. And so it's just a fabulous, and he gets to do all these things that humans get to do with balls. And but look at the expressions on his
Yeah.
face too. So
Yes.
just like the alligator, the character helps us along with the storyline.
Yes.
That the young kids can talk. And speaking of that, I know, I said that we would talk a little bit about what we thought would be winners, and I know you were very disappointed
I was.
that this one did not win any award for that matter.
Right.
But
yeah.
your award.
Yes, this is the Anastasia Award.
Well, but I think the Ames Public Library Children's Award maybe, because
Sure.
we all really enjoyed
Yeah.
this one.
What I loved about this one, it came across our desk sometime last year, is that it is, I think, great for beginning readers because there are few words. A lot of them rhyme, which is also a good help for beginning readers. But there's an excellent storyline along with it, and I found myself guessing until the very end what happened to his new blue socks. And I think it's also great to share about emotions because his face, he's representing depressed here and very confused and frustrated. So there's lots of emotions and just a great storyline. So this was one that actually, when you are a librarian, you can recommend the books to the committee, which I didn't really realize before this year. And so I had recommended it to the committee. So that, I think, partly was why I was so
part of that.
attached to it. But, I know they considered it, and there's always a lot of wonderful books published
Right.
every year.
And
so.
we can talk a little bit, because most of them are done by committees, and they are people that submit their application and are chosen
Right.
by the groups, whether it's American Library Association or YALSA, which is the young adult portion, subgroup of it, or ALKS, which is the children's portion of it.
Right.
And then different people's, like the Schneider Award comes from a family dedicating it to their child as well, with disabilities. So we have all these different types, but
Right.
they are chosen, and then they get these books all year long. And you are right. I have not noticed a lot of the nominations or requests from nominations until the last couple years. I think it was pretty exclusive before. It's
yeah.
just starting to open up. So if you go to the American Library Association page, you can see a lot of those definitions and why they were created. But I know we've got not very much time left, and we
Right.
have lots and lots of books. So I know we're not going to get through all of these books. So again, if you want to go to our webpage and go to our children's portion of that page, and you can access some of the award-winning book lists that we have, and also on our blog that we
Right.
have that
Yeah.
you sure can come and take a look at and tell us or comment and or vote on your favorite books throughout the year. So we're starting already with 2014's
Right, and
published.
that's at aplbestbooks.blogspot.com.
Thank you.
So-
That's why
Yeah,
I have other
so you
people
can-
that help me out on this. So, or you can call the Ames Public Library
Yeah, or
and
stop in.
ask at the Children's Department what that address is, and we would be happy to give it to you if you get somebody other than myself. But let's go. We have some really wonderful other books. Let's kind of take a look at some of, as you can see, they're kind of thicker, and they're for
Yeah.
older boys and girls. The next age group probably would be our Newbery. And Kate DiCamillo wins again. I don't know, is this third, fourth?
I don't
Something
know,
like
I
that.
haven't-
I would
yeah.
have to go and look at that. But Flora and Ulysses, tell us a little bit about that book.
This book is unique in that it is not just what we would call a straight-up novel. There's interspersed graphic novel panels as well as some different illustrations. And it happens to be about a squirrel who got vacuumed up and then resuscitated with CPR, and then through that whole process obtained some amazing superpowers.
Right.
So it's definitely a creative topic or
Very
theme for
creative.
juvenile fiction. So what did you think about it?
I guess it's safe to say it probably would not have been one of my picks, but part of the Newbery Award is being innovative. And what Kate DiCamillo is doing is interspersing that graphic novel-like book experience with a novel.
Right.
And
It's just-
I don't know, it was pretty hard to believe that this squirrel could be resuscitated and then could write poetry and do all that. So I thought I had a hard time dealing with that, but maybe that's just because I believe more in the fantasy of like fairy tales than this part.
It is always interesting when either we tend to think of, anyway, I do, a fantasy world that's completely separate, like maybe Harry Potter. You
Right.
know, like it's a completely separate world. Every now and then they come to our world, but it's a completely separate world. Or it's like realistic, like Knock Knock, if we talk about that, that's very realistic. And this is somewhere in between. It's
Yeah.
like our world with vacuums, but then also poetry writing squirrels.
Right.
It's an interesting twist, and I wonder if we'll see more of that. As
Yeah.
I think that's kind of where the vampires are.
Yeah.
That type
Kind
of
of.
it's our world, but there's a tweak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, some people, it looks like in the reviews, like if you go out to Goodreads or in the reviews, it looks like you either really loved it or you hated it.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some in between, obviously, but it's an interesting concept.
Yeah.
And Kate DiCamillo also earned many
The ambassador.
the
for children's
ambassador.
literature
So she'll be
this year.
talking around the country about all of her works, the works and representing children's writers everywhere. So
Yeah.
she's had a big year. Flora
Yes.
and Ulysses. I would
Yes.
recommend reading it. I just Newbery. I don't know.
Yeah.
I read The Year of Billy Miller by Kevin Hinks.
Which was his second award. I mean, he won the Geisel honor,
Right,
and then
and then
won
this,
the Newbery honor, which
honor.
I thought was
Yeah, for two different items, obviously.
Right,
And,
yes.
And this one, and it could possibly be because Billy Miller is a second grader, and I have a second grade granddaughter. So
Yes.
when I was reading it through her mind, and Billy Miller is very scared about what's going to happen in his second grade year and whether or not his teacher will like him or does like him or doesn't like him, and then he also has that little girl know-it-all type of person that's in his class and that keeps him in line, in which I know that's probably was my granddaughter. but thinking about, it really goes into Billy's head and his psyche as to who he is and what's going on. And
Yeah.
very interesting take. And I don't think, because second graders, that age is, you like to read about people that are older than you.
Right.
And so, this is for, first graders would want to read, and yet they're not at this level sometimes either. So
right, but some are. I mean,
but some are.
We have a lot of kids or parents that come in with their kids that are in kindergarten that are reading at that second grade
Yeah.
level. So I think it's great that some authors are able to write things where the
Right.
topic is
And
what
do
that
that, yeah.
age is.
And he does a great job with the characterization and the plot. And I mean, it isn't everybody's happy. In the
Right.
end, he's still frustrated with this know-it-all girl, and
Yeah.
he's still worried about things going. So there's some resolve, but it isn't magically resolved. Mom and Dad are alive. That's
Oh, right. Yes, that's
typically,
another-
and they're a happy couple. And
Right.
it's got some really positive things, and it's truly about this young boy that is trying to get through second grade. So
That's very interesting. So this won a Newbery honor, and this one a Newbery honor, and it's a very different book. I mean, this is about a 13-year-old girl who's basically she leaves her home for a while to search for her sister, but the subject matter and the age is completely beyond that. So
that
it's
one. So
very
good
interesting.
caution there is
Yes.
that just because it wins the Newbery doesn't mean that your third grader can read it.
Right, yeah.
It goes through the whole gamut of ages up through
14.
14. But the next step, and that's why a few years ago, well, probably a dozen or so, more
Yes,
than a few,
yeah. a few.
there was the Prince Award
Yes.
that would specifically go to that teen fiction.
Right.
And we have a couple of those too.
Yeah, so this won the actual Prince Award for a distinguished teen book, and it's called Midwinter Blood by Marcus Sedgwick, who's written Revolver previously, which was very, very highly reviewed, and he has another one coming out. It's a very difficult to describe book. It's written in 7 parts, and it follows the paths of a woman and a man through time, I think from like the 800s to 2050 or something like that. And they come back in different time periods, and their stories play out, and they're reincarnated in the different time periods, and they make a connection in each time period. So it's an interesting way of telling a love story, a story about what happens in the world and how are we connected to the rest of the world. Very beautiful and poetic. Not something that any of us were really excited to pick up, so it's always interesting to see what the awards committee find is interesting that we didn't necessarily think the same way, which is fine.
And I think if it's how that look is on the award. That in our case, it's part of our collection tool of developing our collection, and sometimes it's providing that depth of the collection. So and not necessarily what we would pick up on our own, because we all have our own reading preferences, and just like our public does. And so that is, again, I think the honor books and the award-winning books it should be just a guide. There's no guarantee that you're going to like it because this won its award or somebody said it was good. Because that right book with the right person at the right time. And let's go to, because now not only is fiction part of it, but we also have some wonderful nonfiction. And I think there's been some very much some themes, like the World War II and one in all of the scopes of the nonfiction and the fiction has been very interesting this year. So I would invite you to take a look at Courage Has No Color and Imprisoned, the Branded by Triangle, I think is a very interesting part of all that type of history that we might not be aware of, and it's always good to broaden ourselves in that way. But I know we have a couple here, and we're running out of time. So this Paris over Puerto Rico, I think, is so much worth noting. The illustrations are just fabulous, and it was a Seibert winner, and it's a nonfiction book, but the illustrations, I mean, it just is fabulous as well. And then we start out the book, we have to think about that print awareness as to which way we're going to hold that book. And but the illustrations are paper collage type of illustrations, helping with the text. But the text is fabulous as well. It kind of takes us through the history of these wonderful birds in Puerto Rico, and who inhabited that area, and how these birds have went from being flourishing in this area to not being to being almost extinct. But again, the illustrations are just, I don't know, they're just wonderful. So, and happy to know, this would be a wonderful book to share with your class or with your kids, to talk about how we as humans take over places, and but yet it would be also a good supplemental book on the history of Puerto Rico and finding that information out, or just looking at how she did the illustrations.
The history and science and geography is
it's
all
just throughout
in
that book.
Yeah.
So, and another very nice, and I know it was one of yours, so we'll one of your picks as well. We'll let you talk about Knock Knock.
So this is Knock Knock by Daniel Bietti, and this won the Coretta Scott King Illustrator Award. So in addition to awards for certain age groups, there are awards for books that speak to the experience of a certain race. And so this is for African American illustrators, and there's a separate illustrator and separate writer award. And there's also one for the Hispanic authors and illustrators. And so that's been really neat to see another group of people. Knock Knock tells the story of a young boy who had a tradition with his father that he would knock on his bedroom door and the boy would pretend to be asleep until the dad finally came in, and then the boy would jump up and hug him. And he talks about how much he loves his father and enjoys their time together. But then one day his dad doesn't come to the door. And so the rest of the book is him dealing with the loss of his father, and it never says why his dad doesn't come back. And the illustrations do a great job of showing how his whole city block is, and how everyone has this experience of missing someone. And you can see in each building there's the face of a child that's missing someone. And the experience of missing someone is really, unfortunately, common to a lot of different people,
Right.
no matter their race or their station or their class or anything in life. So I appreciated that. And the illustrations in this book are so amazing. I would have chosen this for the Caldecott, I think, if I had my way. There's elephants that march through some of the pages just to symbolize that remembrance. And he does collages and photographs that are then incorporated into the collages. So
Yes,
it's
so-
very creative. And the person who wrote it is actually, he's a teacher and also has performed this like as a stand-up
Yeah.
poem routine kind of thing.
Right,
So
perform
it's a
this-
different,
the story.
the story,
So
yeah.
And it would be very cool to have seen that, or to see
Yeah.
that as well, because
Yeah.
it could be a wonderful piece to act out in
Right.
addition to the illustrations. I mean, Brian Collier did a wonderful job of bringing that story to
Yes.
life
Yes.
in the illustrations, but Daniel Beatty's story itself I would love to see the performance. That would be
Yeah.
fabulous to do. But like you said, we don't know why Dad is gone. I mean, people can make assumptions, and people have in the
Yeah.
reviews. And there's been some criticism about, it not having a real resolved. Well, there's lots of criticisms always about what happens, but the child does grow up and he becomes successful in what he wants
Right.
to do and lives out. And then he does get to meet Dad in the end. One day he comes to his door, and he gets to see him. And then I do also appreciate the author's note and
Yes.
the illustrator's note. It helps bring out some of that information that you kind of glance over. As I was telling you before, he has a rainbow on his wall decoration, and then when Dad isn't there anymore, his rainbow has fallen. And I remember looking at that and looking at the illustration, but it was purposely done, and that's what makes a good quality book too, is the reasons behind why they do what they do.
Yeah.
So I think this is a really good one to end on, because it is, I know it's very moving, and it's very dramatic, but it also kind of reaffirms that thought process of, it's a right book for the right child at the right time. This isn't necessarily one that you would just pick up and read for pleasure, because there's lots of, not that you would benefit from it if you did, but that isn't necessarily what you would do. But it would fit, if a child is doing or experiencing things that they don't understand in the absence of, whether it's death or whatever the reason is, a very good book to use. But again, it's that book that speaks to the reader, or and is able to go from there and hopefully better their lives and
Yeah.
identify with that. So whether it's an award winner or not, every book speaks to someone, and every story speaks to someone. And hopefully you as a reader can find those books for yourself, and maybe use our winners as a guide, or use the librarians at the library to help you find that, because they are wonderful helpers in that process. So please come and visit us, and visit our website, and visit our blog as well. And until then, happy reading.